And we're back with week 9 of Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, and I cannot believe that we have made it this far. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Alexis. I'm a full-time artist here in Brooklyn, New York, and on this channel, typically I share my art and inspiration and life in the city. But in this series, we are working our way through Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, week by week, to share just honest thoughts and reflections and hope that it might resonate or spark conversation, but absolutely also very much accountability for myself so I finish this practice. And we are on week 9, and in week 9, Julia Cameron talks about recovering a sense of compassion. And I was really excited to see this section, and overall, just off the bat, I want to say that I felt that this chapter was really cohesive. She kept coming back to this idea of compassion, and each section really felt like it fit. And that hasn't been the case with all of the chapters in the past. Sometimes I feel like she just has a lot of information to share or ideas that she wants to make sure that she gets across, and so she'll just kind of pop them into a chapter, and I'm sure that within her understanding of the practice there's a rhyme or a reason behind it, but at times it kind of feels a little disjointed. That's not the case with week 9. Week 9 really felt like a cohesive idea, and everything kind of built back into that idea of compassion. She opens up this week on compassion with an entire section on fear. And in this section of fear, she really tells us that we need to spend time feeling our uncomfortable emotions and accurately naming them. And she says that oftentimes as blocked artists, we will call ourselves lazy, and we'll get really down on ourselves, and we'll kind of self-berate because we can't find the courage to move forward. And she says, it's not that you're lazy, it's that you're fearful. And I know from personal experience that this is quite accurate. I've shared a lot about how I am someone who just really has this desire to learn and to try and to experience as much as I can. However, I also do experience that fear when I'm initially beginning something. And depending on how much pressure I put on that practice, the fear will exist for a period of time. Sometimes short, sometimes long. I know within my art practice, there are times where that fear, which I have called laziness, has held me back from beginning something for quite some time. And I know that I've mentioned it before, because we're on week 9, so I've been sharing quite often, quite a bit, but there are some things that I would like to do with my practice that are just a little bit different than what I've done in the past. And I have convinced myself that I can't move forward with them because, we have a very small apartment, and my studio is in our living room, and I've convinced myself that we don't have enough space for me to really spread out the materials to dive into it in a way that I would really want to, or that I can't take up that space. And so I convince myself that that's for future me, and there's no way that I can possibly engage with that practice now. And I realize that that's just a lie that I've been telling myself because I'm fearful of just like the messiness that comes with any new practice, right? And so being in a common space within my home, listen, my husband is so kind and he's so supportive, and I know that if something looked horrendous, he would just keep his mouth shut and he would let me figure it out. But there is something about the vulnerability of beginning something new in a small space where it's not private. Right? And so the fear of being perceived perhaps has held me back. But I keep coming back to that idea in my morning pages of how I really want to jump into this practice. I really want to jump into those pieces. And so, those morning pages really, really do help me sort out my thoughts and get a very clear path forward on what it is that I want to do. And because this is an idea that has consistently come up over the past, few months, I think it's something that I need to break through, and I need to just sit with that discomfort because growth does not happen when you stay in your comfort zone. And I have absolutely stayed within my comfort zone. I have absolutely continued to make those pieces that feel most comfortable as a way to stay creative and as a way to like keep moving the practice forward, if you will, but I'm not actually growing in that. And so it is time. And this coming week, I am giving myself permission to take up space, to maybe be a little scared, to maybe feel a little vulnerable, but to see what comes of it. And I'm really excited about it. So I'll be documenting that in a video that's just like, you know, one of my vlogs. If you're curious to see what's created, keep your eyes peeled there. But I really appreciated Julia Cameron's discussion on fear. And in her next section entitled Enthusiasm, Julia really talks about enthusiasm versus discipline. And she challenges us that it's enthusiasm, not discipline, that leads to a sustainable practice. When I first read this, I was like, what? But I do agree. If we are talking about the act of being creative, the act of creating, that takes an enthusiasm. But if we're talking about like, so where I struggled with this was like, I wouldn't have a practice if I didn't have discipline. And I have been really working hard to get structures and systems into place so that I can continue to grow my business and what have you. And that's the catch, right? So if we're talking about creative practice for the sake of being creative, that takes enthusiasm. And if we're talking about like the business side, that's totally different. That takes discipline. And so for me, it was really helpful to make this distinction between the two. Yes, I need discipline in order to grow my business and to build a life here in New York City, but I need to hold on to that enthusiasm. And I need to hold on to what it actually translates is to being filled with God. And she says that you have to hold on to that. And so it's that act of receiving so that you have something to put down versus trying to think something up, right? And I know that when I have those moments where I've received the inspiration, I've said it before, that's what grows my practice. And that does not rely on discipline. That relies on an enthusiasm. And within that enthusiasm, showing up day after day and really inviting that inner artist, and she says that inner child, out to play. And she connects it back to that idea of compassion, where if you're going to develop a relationship with a child, you need to be warm and encouraging and inviting. And we have to think about our artist, our creative self in that way. We need to be kind and encouraging and warm so that we can really foster this sustainable creativity that will allow us to build a practice that can weather any storm. And if I'm being honest with you, lately, most of what I have been really focusing on is that discipline. How do I set things up so that I can be the most successful moving forward? So it has been a lot of systems and routines and schedules and making sure that everything is like in order so that I can continue to grow. And in my morning pages, the thing that consistently has come up is that I want to play more. And I keep saying, I want to play, which is funny because I don't typically go around saying I want to play. But when it comes to my art, I have been really reiterating this idea that I need more time to just mess around. And that very much relates to those pieces that I haven't had the courage to start. And so I think that reading this section and really seeing her affirming the need for enthusiasm and for the vulnerability that it takes to just play and to figure it out, it's given me permission to step into that a little bit more and to really just see what happens and to recognize how I was holding myself back. And so I'm just really excited to see what comes from me allowing myself to really sit in that enthusiasm of a creative existence and to have a little bit more fun with what it is that I'm doing. And I have really just this past week kind of taken a step back from all of the administration stuff and allowed my brain the space that it needs to kind of piece things together and to find that inspiration. And so there's a lot more that I've just been receiving over the last week about how I want to navigate moving forward. And I'm really excited to see how, if I can be disciplined and implementing that time for play, right? And I think that that was something that when I was in an artist cohort a few years ago, the mentor of that group said that oftentimes as a creative who has a business, you have to be very diligent to carve out time or to set time aside in order for your personal projects or for your sketchbook or just anything that is not related to the business aspect of your practice. And so I do think that there is like a discipline that I need to implement in order to allow myself more play. And I think that goes back to last week when I was talking about my routines and my schedules. I need to get more consistent with giving myself downtime and time off so that I have the mental space to really like tap into that well of creativity that I know exists within me so that I can really have more fun and expand in that way. And in her section entitled U-Turns, I found this honestly a little confusing at first. I had to keep going back to reread it. I mean, like maybe 3 times, but I went back several times to understand how she was using the term U-turn, because in my understanding, the U-turn is what you do after you make the mistake, right? So, oh no, I've gone the wrong way, so I'm going to make a U-turn so I can self-correct. But the way that she uses that term U-turn in this section, she uses that synonymous with the mistake. So the U-turn is actually the mistake in her text. So a little confusing, but once you kind of get that framing down, it's fine. But she talks about how oftentimes artists will self-sabotage, and that these U-turns and that these mistakes are part of life and it's part of a creative practice, and it's all about what you do moving forward from those mistakes or from those U-turns that really set you up to succeed and set you up for that sustainable practice. She says, don't let those mistakes, that self-sabotage, become the block that prevents you from moving forward, and it so often can. And I know that there have been times, especially when I was like remote teaching and building up my practice and my business simultaneously in the height of lockdown. So like 2020 to 2021, I had a really low threshold for overwhelm just because there was like so much coming at me at every turn. And there were a few opportunities that came my way that were incredible. I mean, they were incredible, working with some really big brands, and I had a publisher reach out about illustrating a children's book, but I turned those down because I felt like, one, I was too new and I didn't have the skills that I needed to be successful, and 2, I was just too overwhelmed. I didn't know how I was going to be able to add anything else to my plate. And so one could argue that I self-sabotaged those opportunities. And I think what's really important to hold on to, and what she really pushes us to accept in this section, is to not allow that to become like a block moving forward. And how oftentimes as we are just starting out in a practice, we will convince ourselves that we don't have what it takes to accomplish whatever might come our way. And she assures us that like we do, and we can, and it might be uncomfortable. Oftentimes it is uncomfortable, but that's where the most growth takes place. And so instead of self-sabotaging and kind of turning those opportunities away or pushing them aside, really stepping into your power and stepping forward into those opportunities so that you can really achieve perhaps the next level of your creative practice. And that's something that I've really been holding on to within the last year or so as things are presented. You know, it's like, I might not know how to do it, but I sure as hell know I can figure it out, right? And I think for me, getting past that extreme burnout and really finding my feet more firmly placed on the ground, I have more courage, I have more space to accept those opportunities as they arise, because I have the mental space to take it on. And I think that that's also worth noting. So yeah, I don't know. I really appreciated her just acknowledging that self-sabotage is part of the game. And what's the most important is what you do on the other side of it. And you have to show yourself that compassion. And she said that oftentimes those moments of mistake will feel the most earth-shattering because in our creative practice, we are so vulnerable. And we put so much of ourselves into what it is that we create. And so that when it doesn't go right, or if we make a mistake, or we fuck it up, we can get really down on ourselves. And we kind of, perhaps for me, I know I kind of like turn into a hermit, and it takes me a minute to kind of catch my breath again. And I think that there really is something to allowing yourself that moment to feel those uncomfortable emotions, naming them, and then stepping back out into your power so that it will inform how you engage, not only with your practice, but with opportunities and with others. And Julia tells us in that section on U-terms, like, don't be afraid to ask for help. And that has been one of the biggest lessons of my life, period. Trauma. Asking for help has been a great challenge. And it has been something that really over the past decade, I have been trying to be better at. And really, after leaving my career, it has been something that I have really had to step more comfortably into. And I keep seeing messages around community and how important community is, but how often we ourselves hold back the power of community when we resist to ask for help. We're so quick to offer help to others, but feel like we would be a burden if we ourselves need that help. And the argument that I have consistently seen is that you are in that like weakness of not being able to ask for help, holding back the strength of community. And so I really love that challenge. And it's still uncomfortable as hell to ask for help, but I see the benefit and the value of it. And to be frank with you, that artist cohort that I was a part of back in 2022, there are a handful of us that are still in contact, and I cannot tell you how invaluable that community has been to me to reach out to when I have questions about pricing or clients and things that are new that I'm not quite sure how to navigate. Having a community of people who are on the same path, even though it might look a little bit different, has been one of the greatest strengths I've experienced as I navigate this new path forward. And she has a section titled Blasting Through Blocks, and in that section it's just actionable things that you can do should you find yourself within a creative block. And I found it to be interesting and helpful, and I would encourage you to take a look at it. And this week's tasks were all about what I perceived to be kind of like taking stock of where you are, where you want to be, where you've been, and very much connected to like the morning pages practice or how I've been using it. Just kind of getting really clear on the path forward that you want and what you can do in order to get there. So 10 out of 10, really appreciated this week's tasks. And I continued with my morning pages. I'll be quite honest, I do struggle with completing my morning pages every morning. And I think that's just because routine has been a bit of a challenge for me. I wake up and sometimes Mario is here, sometimes he's not. And, we have such a small space that oftentimes my mornings look vastly different from one to the next. And so if I can kind of carve out that time before I begin my art practice or whatever business tasks that need to take place, then I can make sure that I get them done. But sometimes I just forget. And I think that that's okay. I think once again, it's showing yourself compassion, but also for me, it's like when I start to become overwhelmed by the thoughts that are swimming around in my head, and I start to be like, oh my gosh, there are so many things that I need to get done. It really is like, I need to get back to the morning pages, that slow and steady, get them down so that I can focus on what needs to happen, and I can free myself of that mental load of all of the things that need to get done. Because eventually it'll get done, but it doesn't have to get done today. And I don't know if I'm doing my artist dates correctly, but once again, I think it's just making this work for you. So I went to Rockaway and I met up with some friends. It's a beach here in New York, Far Rockaway. It's my favorite beach. And I just sat by the ocean, and while they were reading and napping, I just kind of allowed my mind to wander and to think about what it is that I want out of this life. And the thing that consistently comes back to me when I allow myself that space is how much of a need there is for imagination, and how much I need to really embrace imagination as I am planning and dreaming up what is possible for me and my life. And I am really grateful that I had that time to step out. And so I didn't have inspiration for like an art piece, if you will, but I definitely found like a path forward, or not even a path forward, but I found like just that message that I need to hold on to of like, don't dream small, right? Don't think that the answer is going to be no. And so then in that fear of not being able to achieve what you want, or perceiving how it might be received, go big. Go as big as you can imagine, and then let it fall as it will, but don't hold yourself back, and really kind of put it out there what you want. And so I have been really challenging myself to dream big and to get really, really clear about what it is that I want for my life and for my art practice. And I am feeling really encouraged. But y'all, this week was real short, and I'm not gonna lie, I was grateful for that, because week 8 was so long and it really had so many sections. And I do feel like week 8 was one of those weeks that kind of felt a little disjointed, like, oh yeah, here's this and this and this and this and that. And sometimes there was a thread of connection, but other times I really struggled to see how it connected. So I just kind of took each section for what it was. And like I said earlier, week 8 was not the only week that I found to be like that, but I really appreciated week 9 and just this consistent message of compassion towards yourself as you are reclaiming your artist identity. So yeah, that's it. And I cannot believe that this is almost over. I'm really gonna miss this series. I started this series really, really early on in my YouTube existence. I haven't been on YouTube for very long. And I've really appreciated this like weekly-ish check-in with y'all. And some of you have told me that you are following along week by week with me, and I am so thrilled to hear that. But yeah, I'm gonna miss it. And so we've still got 3 more weeks. It's not over yet, but I know it's drawn to a close. And I just want to thank you for spending your time with me. I know time is so valuable, and I really am honored for every minute that you spend with me. And if you found value here, please give this video a thumbs up. That helps YouTube know to send it out to others who might also find value. And if you would like to follow along, I know we're drawn to a close with the Artist Way, but I do artist vlogs and life here in the city, so you can see my art practice in action, and I don't know, a very real window into the life of a 41-year-old here in New York City. But yeah, I'd be thrilled if you subscribed. We have a very small but growing community, and I am just blown away by how many of you are choosing to spend a bit of your days with me, and I'm just so thrilled for this community. But with all of that being said, let's not make this longer than it needs to be. I just want to say thank you, and whatever time of day you've watched this, I hope it's been a kind one. Until next time.